There's a moment when the familiar becomes foreign, when the safety you thought you had begins to feel different. You might not be able to pinpoint exactly when it started, but you sense it now, the weight of eyes that you never noticed before. Your morning routine, once private and unnoticed, suddenly feels observed. Your late-night work sessions, your improved fitness routine, your new reading habits, all of it seems to carry a different energy, as if invisible audiences have been assembled around your life. The revelation doesn't arrive with dramatic flair. It creeps in slowly, like fog rolling over familiar streets. You start noticing how conversations with neighbors have shifted from casual pleasantries to questions that feel too specific. How colleagues who once ignored your existence now seem to know details about your schedule, your goals, your recent achievements. The coffee shop barista who used to mind their own business now asks about your day with a knowing smile that feels calculated, rather than genuine. But here's what most people never realize. The attention didn't start when you became successful. It started when you started caring, when you began prioritizing your growth over their comfort, when your improvements became visible rather than invisible. The moment you decided to become someone different, you became a story that others were unconsciously writing and rewriting in their minds. Power rarely announces itself with trumpets or grand gestures. Instead, it operates through networks of quiet observation, subtle information gathering, and psychological positioning that most people never recognize until it's too late. The most influential forces in your environment don't need to be loud to be devastating. They work through silence, through patience, through the accumulation of tiny details that paint a picture of your life without your consent. Think about the last time you noticed someone's success. Maybe it was a colleague who started coming to work early, taking on new projects, networking with senior management. You probably didn't think much of it at first. Just someone getting their career in order, you might have thought. But then you started noticing other things, their confidence during meetings, the way they carried themselves differently, the subtle shift in how others responded to them. By the time you realized, they had positioned themselves strategically throughout the organization. They were already moving in directions you couldn't reach. This is the power of quiet transformation. It works because most people underestimate the impact of small, consistent changes. They assume that because someone isn't making big announcements or dramatic gestures, nothing significant is happening, but the truth is far more subtle and far more powerful. The silent observer in your life, be it a neighbor, colleague, family member, or friend, has been collecting data about you for months, or even years. They know when you typically leave for work, what days you're home more often, the brands of products you buy, the people you interact with, the books you're reading. They piece together this information not because they're malicious, but because human nature compels us to understand the world around us through observation and pattern recognition. This isn't paranoia or conspiracy theory. It's simply the way human consciousness works in social environments. When someone close to you begins changing, becoming more disciplined, more focused, more successful, it disrupts the social ecosystem. Your improvement forces others to confront questions about their own choices, their own potential, their own level of effort. And human psychology being what it is, not everyone responds to this confrontation in positive ways. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to discuss. Your personal growth creates discomfort in others, and discomfort manifests as attention. Not attention in the form of congratulations or support, though that happens too, but attention in the form of scrutiny, judgment, and subtle resistance that can manifest in ways you never expected. When you begin improving yourself, you inadvertently become a mirror that reflects back the areas where others have settled, the habits they've let slide, the dreams they've postponed. This reflection isn't intentional on your part, but it's inevitable. Your discipline highlights their lack of it. Your goal setting reveals their aimlessness. Your commitment exposes their procrastination. The human mind has several ways of dealing with this discomfort. Some people respond by becoming genuinely supportive, admiring your growth and allowing it to inspire their own. But others respond differently. They start observing you more closely, trying to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and whether there's something you're not telling them. They begin interpreting your actions through lenses of suspicion, competition, or inadequacy. This is where the subtle observation begins to take on a different quality. It stops being natural human curiosity and becomes something more calculated. The questions become more probing. The comments become more pointed. The casual interest transforms into systematic information gathering, often conducted so subtly that you don't even realize it's happening. You might find yourself explaining your choices more often than before. Why you're waking up earlier, why you're limiting certain social activities, why you're being more selective about how you spend your time and energy. These questions often come disguised as friendly interest or genuine concern. but they serve a deeper purpose. They're attempts to understand and categorize your transformation. The uncomfortable reality is that your growth has created an information vacuum. Others see the changes but not the process, the results but not the effort, the improvements but not the discipline required to achieve them. This vacuum gets filled with assumptions, speculation, and narratives that may or may not align with your actual intentions and methods. But here's what will surprise you even more. The people watching you most closely aren't the ones you expect, and they're gathering information in ways that might shock you. What if I told you that your neighbor's seemingly innocent questions about your morning routine are actually part of a larger pattern? What if the casual comments about your new car, your recent promotion, or your improved fitness routine aren't just small talk? Stay with me. Because what I'm about to reveal will change how you think about everyone around you. Information moves through social networks like water through a complex system of underground rivers, hidden, powerful, and often impossible to trace back to its source. You might never speak about your business plans to your neighbor, yet somehow they know you're planning to start something new. You might never discuss your relationship problems with your coworker, yet somehow they seem to have detailed opinions about your romantic life. This happens because information doesn't just travel through direct communication. It flows through observation, interpretation, and 1,000 tiny interactions that you might not even recognize as information sharing. Your body language tells stories. Your social media activity reveals patterns. Your purchases signal changes in your life. Your schedule modifications indicate new priorities. The person who noticed you starting your car at 5:30 a.m. instead of 7:00 a.m. might mention this observation to their spouse, who mentions it to their friend, who mentions it to your mutual acquaintance. Within weeks, multiple people in your social circle know about your new morning routine, even though you never directly told anyone. But it goes deeper than simple observation. People don't just collect information about you, they interpret it, analyze it, and often distort it in ways that serve their own psychological needs. Your neighbor sees you ordering a salad instead of your usual burger and assumes you're on some kind of special diet. Your coworker sees you declining after-work drinks and assumes you're going through financial problems. Your friend sees you buying new clothes and assumes you're trying to impress someone specific. These interpretations rarely stay private. They become part of the social conversation about you, contributing to narratives that form and solidify without your awareness or consent. A single observation can spark a chain of assumptions that transforms into a completely different story by the time it reaches you through the social grapevine. The speed and accuracy of information transmission depend on several factors. The more visible your changes, the more dramatic your transformation, and the more people who are involved in interpreting your actions, the faster and more distorted the information becomes. Your quiet, gradual improvement might take months to register with those around you, but your sudden lifestyle change might be analyzed, interpreted, and spread throughout your social network within days. What's particularly fascinating and disturbing is how accurate some of these interpretations can be, even when they're based on limited information. The human brain is remarkably good at pattern recognition, and when people observe you consistently over time, they often develop surprisingly accurate insights into your character, motivations, and future plans. The problem is that these insights are rarely shared with you directly. Instead, they inform the way others interact with you, make decisions about you, and ultimately influence opportunities that come your way. But here's where it gets really interesting and potentially dangerous. The information gathering isn't just happening among the people you know. It's happening through channels you might not even realize exist. Your morning jog route is being mapped. Your online shopping patterns are being analyzed. Your phone's location data is creating a detailed picture of your life that strangers can access. The surveillance you think is only coming from your immediate circle is actually much more extensive than you imagine. The shift happens almost overnight. But the foundation has been building for months. One day you're just another person in the neighborhood, going about your business, minding your own life. The next day you notice something has changed. The way people look at you is different. The questions they ask are more pointed. The conversations feel like interrogations disguised as social interaction. This awakening, the moment you realize you've become a subject of observation, typically coincides with a significant milestone in your personal development. Maybe it's a promotion at work. Maybe it's a visible improvement in your health and fitness. Maybe it's the launch of your side business. Maybe it's the purchase of your first home. The specific trigger doesn't matter as much as the fact that your improvement has become undeniable. Before this moment, your changes were invisible to most people. Your growing discipline was happening in private. Your improving habits were too small to notice. Your gradually shifting mindset was internal and unobservable, but at some point, the accumulation of these changes becomes visible on the outside. Your confidence increases. Your decisions become more decisive. Your presence carries different energy, and suddenly, you're not invisible anymore. This transition from invisible to visible is where the real trouble begins. The people who have been observing your gradual improvement suddenly have to process the fact that someone they thought they knew is becoming someone else entirely. This forces them to confront questions they might not be comfortable answering. Why are you changing? What does it mean for our relationship? What does it say about where I am in my life? Responses to these questions vary widely. Some people embrace your growth and allow it to inspire their own development. Others become defensive, interpreting your improvement as a judgment of their current situation. Still others become curious, wanting to understand your methods and replicate your success. But the most interesting and potentially problematic response is the one that leads to systematic observation. When people feel threatened by your improvement or don't understand how you achieved it, they often respond by gathering more information. They start paying closer attention to your routines, your choices, your interactions. They look for patterns, clues, secrets that might explain your transformation. This isn't necessarily malicious. It's often born from a genuine desire to understand and potentially replicate your success. But the result is the same. You become a subject of close observation and analysis. The timing of this awakening is crucial. It typically happens just as you're becoming comfortable with your new routine, just as you've established new habits and let go of old ones. This creates a unique vulnerability. You're exposed just as you're settling into your new identity. The spotlight of observation arrives precisely when you're most vulnerable to being affected by external opinions and judgments. What makes this particularly challenging is that the observation often comes disguised as support and encouragement. People ask questions about your methods, your plans, your goals. They want to know what you're doing differently and how they might do the same. These questions feel genuine and supportive, and often they are. But they also serve a deeper purpose. They allow others to gather information about your life and your plans, often without you realizing the extent of what you're revealing. But here's the twist that most people never see coming. The people watching you aren't just trying to understand your success. They're trying to position themselves relative to your future trajectory. Some are looking for ways to benefit from your growth. Others are looking for ways to compete with you. And a few are looking for ways to slow you down. The question is, which category do the people in your life fall into? The answer might surprise you more than you think. The most dangerous thing about being observed isn't the observation itself. It's the stories that others construct from their observations. Human beings are natural storytellers. When we see behavior, patterns, or changes that we don't fully understand, we create narratives to make sense of what we're witnessing. These stories often have nothing to do with reality, but they have everything to do with the observer's psychological needs, insecurities, and worldview. Your neighbor doesn't just see you working from home more often. They create a story about why. Maybe they assume you're struggling at your old job. Maybe they think you've been fired and are trying to hide it. Maybe they assume you're secretly working for a competitor. The specific story depends on their own experiences, their level of trust in your character, and their understanding of what working from home actually means in your industry. These narratives don't stay private. They spread through social networks, often becoming more elaborate and distorted with each retelling. The story about your career struggles becomes a story about your business failures, which becomes a story about your financial problems, which becomes a story about your relationship issues. Each person who hears the story adds their own interpretation, their own assumptions, their own agenda. The power of these external narratives lies in their ability to influence your opportunities before you even know they exist. A reputation for being unstable can prevent you from getting promoted, even if your performance has been stellar. A reputation for being difficult to work with can limit your networking opportunities, even if you've never actually been difficult with anyone. These reputations are built on stories that may have no basis in reality, but they shape how others interact with you nonetheless. What makes this particularly insidious is that the people creating these stories often don't realize they're doing it. They're not sitting around plotting to destroy your reputation. They're simply trying to make sense of what they observe, and their interpretations are colored by their own experiences, biases, and psychological needs. A person who has struggled with their own career might interpret your success as proof that you had unfair advantages. A person who has difficulty with commitment might interpret your focused energy as evidence that you're avoiding some personal issue. The distortion happens gradually. Each observation is interpreted through the lens of existing narratives. If someone already believes you're having career problems, every change in your work pattern confirms that belief. If someone already thinks you're going through a personal crisis, every modification to your routine validates that assumption. The story becomes self-reinforcing, and the evidence to support it is selected unconsciously from the stream of observations. This process is particularly dangerous because it operates below the level of conscious awareness. The people involved don't realize they're creating and spreading potentially harmful narratives. They think they're just sharing observations, asking questions, or expressing concern. But the impact on your life can be profound and long-lasting. The key insight here is that your story has become separate from you. It's now owned by everyone who observes it, and it has a life of its own that you can no longer control. This doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you need to be strategic about how you manage your visibility and your narrative. You can't control what others think, but you can control what they see and how you frame your actions and choices. But here's the plot twist that changes everything. Some of these narratives aren't being created naturally. Some are being carefully constructed and strategically spread. There are people who understand the power of story and reputation, and they're not afraid to use it. They know that in the modern world, perception often matters more than reality, and they're willing to manipulate that perception for their own benefit. The question is, are you paying attention to who's telling your story? When you realize that your life has become a subject of observation and interpretation, the natural instinct is to hide, to become less visible, to retreat into secrecy. This is exactly the wrong response. The goal isn't to disappear, it's to control your narrative while maintaining your growth trajectory. The most successful people understand that visibility is inevitable when you're making progress. Instead of trying to avoid attention, they learn to manage it strategically. They become intentional about what they reveal when they reveal it, and how they frame their actions and choices. This isn't about deception or manipulation. It's about maintaining control over your own story. The first step is recognizing that you can't control what others think, but you can control what they see. This means being selective about your visibility, especially during critical periods of your development. Your morning routine, your goal-setting process, your personal development activities, these don't need to be public information. Privacy isn't secrecy, it's strategic information management. Consistency becomes your greatest ally when dealing with observers. When your actions align with your stated values day after day, week after week, month after month, you become incredibly difficult to misinterpret or misrepresent. People can try to create stories about your behavior, but if your behavior is consistent and authentic, those stories fall apart under scrutiny. This is why disciplined people seem to have an almost magical ability to maintain their reputation and influence even when they're surrounded by gossip and speculation. Their lives are coherent, their choices align with their principles, their actions match their words, there's no gap for others to exploit or misinterpret. Another crucial strategy is learning to communicate with precision rather than volume. Most people try to explain themselves more when they feel misunderstood, but this often backfires. The more you try to justify your choices, the more opportunity you give others to question and analyze those choices. Sometimes the most powerful response to speculation is simple, clear communication that doesn't invite additional questions. Strategic silence is another powerful tool. When you don't provide explanations for your actions, you prevent others from creating narratives about your motivations. This doesn't mean being evasive or dishonest. It means being selective about what information you share and with whom you share it. The most successful people also understand that their growth journey is ultimately their own business. They don't need approval, validation, or understanding from others to continue their development. This internal validation allows them to maintain their course even when external pressures suggest they should change direction or slow down. But here's the ultimate strategy that the most successful people use. One that most people never discover until it's too late. It's not about hiding your growth or managing your reputation. It's about creating such a compelling vision of your future that others want to be part of it. Instead of fighting the attention you're receiving, you channel it. Instead of resenting the observation, you leverage it. And instead of trying to control the narrative, you create one so powerful that others can't help but want to be part of your story. The highest level of response to being observed isn't defensive, it's transformational. Instead of trying to minimize your visibility or manage others' perceptions of you, you create a vision so compelling that observation transforms into aspiration. You become not just someone being watched, but someone others want to learn from, follow, or collaborate with. This transformation happens when you stop seeing observation as surveillance and start seeing it as interest. The same attention that once felt invasive can become the foundation for building influence, community, and opportunities. But this requires a fundamental shift in how you approach your growth and your relationships with others. The key is understanding that people aren't just observing what you're doing. They're trying to understand why you're doing it and how they might do it too. Instead of being secretive about your methods, you become selectively transparent. You share enough information to be helpful without revealing so much that you lose your competitive advantage. You become a source of inspiration and guidance without becoming an open book. This approach requires extreme clarity about your own motivations and methods. When you know exactly why you're doing what you're doing and exactly how you're doing it, you can communicate that information in ways that serve both your interests and the interests of others. You become a leader not because you're trying to lead, but because people naturally gravitate toward those who seem to have figured something out. Most successful people also understand that their growth creates value for others, not just for themselves. When you improve your health, you demonstrate that healthy living is possible. When you advance your career, you show that professional growth is achievable. When you develop new skills, you prove that learning is continuous. This value creation naturally attracts interest and support from others who want to achieve similar results. But here's the crucial insight. This value creation has to be authentic. You can't fake confidence, competence, or character for very long, and when people discover the pretense, the effect is devastating. The most powerful form of influence comes from genuine growth, authentic improvement, and real achievement. People can sense when someone is authentic versus when someone is performing, and they respond differently to each. The master-level response also involves understanding that your growth journey has the potential to inspire others to grow as well. When you succeed in improving your life, you prove to those around you that improvement is possible. This can be threatening to some people, but it can also be inspiring to others. The key is learning to channel the inspiration while managing the threat. This doesn't mean you should minimize your achievements or hide your success. It means you should share your journey in ways that encourage others while maintaining appropriate boundaries about your personal information and strategies. You become a role model not because you set out to be one, but because your authentic growth naturally positions you as an example. And now for the final revelation that will change how you think about observation forever. The people who are watching you most closely aren't your enemies. They're your potential collaborators, investors, partners, and allies. They just don't know it yet. Every person who observes your growth is a potential person who could be part of your success story if you learn to frame the observation correctly. The question isn't how to avoid being watched, it's how to turn your observers into your team. You've reached the point where being seen isn't a vulnerability, it's an advantage. The attention that once felt invasive now feels supportive. The observation that once seemed threatening now seems like interest. The scrutiny that once made you uncomfortable now feels like validation. This is the transformation that happens when you shift from viewing visibility as risk to viewing it as opportunity. In this new reality, every person who observes your growth is a potential stakeholder in your success. Your neighbor who noticed your new morning routine might become your first customer when you launch your business. Your colleague who observed your improved performance might become your advocate for promotion. Your friend who watched your fitness transformation might become your workout partner or your accountability buddy. But this transformation requires you to think differently about relationships and opportunities. Instead of viewing others as potential threats to your progress, you start viewing them as potential contributors to your success. Instead of being defensive about your visibility, you become strategic about your influence. This shift doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without significant personal development. You need to become confident enough in your own path that external opinions don't derail you. You need to become clear enough about your goals that distractions don't faze you. And you need to become skilled enough at creating value that others naturally want to support your efforts. The most successful people understand that their growth creates a ripple effect that extends far beyond their personal achievements. When you improve your life, you demonstrate possibility to others. When you achieve your goals, you prove that goals are achievable. When you overcome challenges, you show that challenges can be overcome. This ripple effect is one of the most powerful forms of influence available to human beings. But here's what most people miss. This influence only works when it's authentic. You can't fake growth, success, or character for very long, and when people discover the pretense, the effect is devastating to your reputation and your opportunities. The most powerful form of influence comes from genuine improvement, real achievement, and authentic character development. This is why the most successful people are often the most transparent about their journey. They share their struggles as well as their successes. their methods as well as their results, their failures as well as their wins. This transparency creates trust, and trust creates opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise. The final insight is this: when you stop trying to hide your growth and start using it to create value for others, everything changes. The observers become your audience, the critics become your teachers, the skeptics become your motivators, and the supporters become your team. Your visibility stops being a liability and becomes your greatest asset, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're willing to share your journey. Not because you're better than others, but because you're committed to helping others improve alongside you. This is the ultimate transformation, from being watched to being followed, from being observed to being respected, from being analyzed to being admired. It happens when you stop seeing your growth as something to protect and start seeing it as something to share. But here's the final truth that will change everything. The person who has been watching you most closely this entire time isn't a neighbor, colleague, or friend. It's someone who understands the power of influence better than anyone else, and they've been learning from your journey in ways you never imagined. They know exactly what you're doing, how you're doing it, and most importantly, they're preparing to do it better. The question is, are you ready for the competition you're about to face? And now for the truth that will redefine everything you thought you knew. The most dangerous competitor isn't the one you can see, it's the one who has been watching, learning, and preparing in the shadows. While you thought you were the one being observed, you were actually the teacher in a classroom you never knew existed. But now that you understand the game, it's time to raise your level. The real question isn't whether you can maintain your growth, it's whether you can grow fast enough to stay ahead of those who have been studying your every move.